Mark sighed, the kind of sigh that comes after a long day of fixing leaky faucets and unclogging drains. The streetlights cast long shadows as he wrestled the heavy trash bin down the driveway. It was always the same routine: dinner, dishes, then the dreaded bin duty. He wasn't a superhero or a secret agent, just Mark, the friendly neighborhood plumber. His life was pretty normal, filled with the usual ups and downs. He liked it that way. The wheels of the bin rattled on the pavement, a familiar sound that usually faded into the background. Tonight, though, the sound seemed louder, almost like a drumroll before something unexpected. He wore his oldest t-shirt, the one with the stain from that time he tried to fix a chocolate fountain. He probably looked a mess, but who was going to see him at this hour? He tugged at the bin, ready to get it over with. Little did he know, his ordinary night was about to take a very strange turn. He just wanted to get the trash to the curb and go to bed. He didn't want any trouble. He especially didn't want to see her. He rounded the corner of Mrs. Henderson's perfectly manicured lawn, the last stretch to the curb. That's when he saw her. Sarah. She was standing under the flickering streetlight, like a character from a movie he hadn't signed up for. She wore a light blue robe, the kind that looked soft and cozy. But it wasn't closed properly. It was open just a little, enough to make his heart skip a beat and his brain short-circuit. He blinked, thinking he was imagining things. Maybe he was just really tired. But no, she was still there. The streetlight buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow on her face. She looked different. Older, somehow. He hadn't seen her in a while, not since school let out for the summer. She'd always been just the girl next door, the one who borrowed sugar and asked for help with her math homework. Now she looked like something else entirely. He swallowed hard, his mouth suddenly dry. He felt like he'd walked onto the wrong stage, into a play he hadn't rehearsed for. This was not part of his regular Tuesday night. She took a step closer, the soft fabric of the robe rustling in the night air. Her eyes, usually bright and full of mischief, were now something else. He couldn't quite place it. Earnest? Determined? A little bit scary? I turned 18 today, she said, her voice low and steady. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It wasn't a casual announcement, like telling him she got a new puppy. It was a statement. A declaration. A challenge, maybe. Mark's grip on the trash bin handle loosened. He felt the plastic bag inside shift, the weight of the garbage suddenly insignificant. He forgot all about leaky faucets and clogged drains. He forgot about Mrs. Henderson's perfect lawn and the buzzing streetlight. All he could focus on was Sarah, standing there in the shadows, telling him she was 18. He knew, logically, that people turned 18 every day. But somehow, this felt different. Important. Wrong. He had a very bad feeling. The plastic bag, overloaded with coffee grounds and junk mail, slipped completely from his grasp. It landed with a soft thud on the pavement, a pathetic little explosion of discarded things. But Mark didn't even flinch. He didn't hear it. He didn't see it. His entire world had shrunk to the space between him and Sarah. His mind raced. 18, that changed things. Didn't it? But what things? He was confused. He was a grown man. He fixed toilets and paid his taxes. He shouldn't be standing here, feeling like a deer caught in headlights. He should be able to handle this. His hands felt clammy. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat was tight. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at her, his mind a jumbled mess of conflicting thoughts and feelings. This wasn't just awkward. This felt dangerous. Like he was standing on the edge of something he couldn't see, something he couldn't control. The weight of the unspoken hung heavy between them. A memory flickered in his mind, unbidden. Sarah, a few years younger, struggling with a math problem at her kitchen table. He'd been over fixing their sink, and she'd asked for help. He remembered patiently explaining fractions, the smell of cookies baking in the oven, the innocent trust in her eyes. He'd felt like an older brother, a mentor. Another memory, Sarah, maybe a year later, offering him a glass of lemonade after he'd spent the afternoon mowing their lawn. She'd brushed her hair behind her ear and thanked him, her cheeks flushed from the summer heat. He'd noticed then that she was growing up, becoming a young woman. He'd felt a pang of something. Acknowledgement? Discomfort? He'd quickly dismissed it. She was just a kid. Now, standing here in the darkness, those memories felt different. Tainted, almost. Had he missed something? Had he been blind to something that was always there? He shook his head slightly, trying to clear the fog in his brain. No. He wouldn't let his thoughts go there. He was a responsible adult. He knew the difference between right and wrong. He had to. From Sarah's side, things looked a little different. Mark had always been kind to her, patient when she didn't understand her homework, always willing to lend a hand. He treated her like a person, not just a little kid. She admired that. She remembered the time her bike chain broke, and he'd spent an hour in the driveway, his hands covered in grease, fixing it for her. He hadn't made her feel silly for not knowing how to do it herself. He'd just smiled and shown her. And then there was the time she'd scraped her knee really badly, and he'd cleaned it and put on a bandage, telling her a funny story to distract her from the pain. He'd made her feel safe. She knew he probably didn't see her the same way she saw him. He was older, a grown-up. But she'd been waiting for this day, her 18th birthday. It felt like a turning point. A chance to show him that she wasn't just a kid anymore. She wanted him to notice her, really notice her, as someone more. She wasn't entirely sure what more meant, but she knew she wanted it with him. Mark's mind was a battlefield. On one side, there was the undeniable attraction. He couldn't deny that Sarah was beautiful, and now that she was 18, the rules had technically changed. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Technically. On the other side, there was the voice of reason, screaming at him to run in the other direction. She was his neighbor. He'd known her since she was a little girl. He was a grown man, with responsibilities and a reputation to uphold. What would people think? More importantly, what would Sarah think of him if he took advantage of the situation? He pictured his own niece, who was about Sarah's age. He imagined some older guy trying to pull the same stunt on her. The thought made his blood run cold. This wasn't about him. It was about Sarah. About protecting her, even from herself. He had a duty to be the responsible one, the adult in the room. Even if every fiber of his being was telling him something else. This was a test. And he had to pass it. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. Sarah, he said, his voice sounding rougher than he intended. It's late. And you should be inside. He paused, searching for the right words, the words that wouldn't hurt her, but would make his position clear. I appreciate. He started, then stopped. Appreciate? That wasn't right. I think you're a wonderful person, Sarah. You're smart and kind, and you have your whole life ahead of you. He took another breath. This was hard. But I'm not the right person for you. There's a big difference between us, Sarah. Not just age, but experience. I care about you too much to let anything happen that you might regret later. You deserve someone who can give you everything you need, someone who's at the same place in life as you are. He hoped she understood. He hoped he was doing the right thing. He hoped he wasn't crushing her dreams. He was choosing to do the right thing. Sarah's face crumpled. The light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a look of confusion and hurt. But I thought, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I thought now that I was 18, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over. She bit her lip, trying to hold them back. She hadn't expected this. She'd imagined a different scenario, a happy ending to her long-held crush. This felt like a punch to the gut. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "It's not about that. It's about, you're always so nice to me. You always listen. You treat me like I'm important." She swiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I thought maybe." She looked away, unable to meet his gaze. The robe slipped further open, but she didn't seem to notice. Her disappointment was palpable, a heavy cloud hanging in the air between them. The silence stretched on, broken only by the buzzing of the streetlight and the sound of Sarah's stifled sobs. Mark knelt down, gently picking up the fallen trash bag. He needed to defuse the situation, to make her understand without making her feel even worse. "Sarah, it's not that I don't care about you. I do. But caring about someone means doing what's best for them, even if it's not what they want to hear." He looked her in the eye, trying to convey the sincerity of his words. "You're just starting out, Sarah. You have so much to experience, so many people to meet. You need to be free to explore all those possibilities, without being tied down to someone like me, someone who's already lived a big chunk of his life." He continued, "Think of it like planting a tree. You wouldn't plant a tiny sapling right next to a giant oak tree, would you? The oak tree would block the sunlight and take all the water. The sapling needs room to grow, to spread its roots, to become its own strong tree." He hoped the analogy made sense. He was trying his best to explain it in a way she could understand. "You're the sapling, Sarah. And I'm the oak tree. You need your own space to grow." Across the street, behind the lace curtains of her living room window, Mrs. Henderson peered out. She'd been awakened by the noise of the rattling trash bin and the muffled voices. She couldn't quite make out what was happening, but she saw Mark kneeling in front of Sarah, his head close to hers. Sarah was was that a robe? And it looked like it was open. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. She'd always thought Mark was such a nice, respectable young man. But this looked suspicious. She didn't know the whole story, but it certainly didn't look good. She muttered to herself, shaking her head. "Poor Sarah," she whispered. "That nice Mark. I never would have suspected." She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. She wasn't sure who to call. Sarah's parents? The police? Maybe she should just wait and see what happened. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She snapped a quick photo with her phone, just in case. She'd decide what to do with it later. The seeds of gossip had been planted. Sarah sniffled, wiping her eyes again. Mark's words, even though they hurt, were starting to sink in. The tree analogy, it was kind of silly, but she understood what he was trying to say. He wasn't saying she wasn't good enough. He was saying she was too good for him. "So, you're saying I should go to college and meet new people?" she asked, her voice still shaky. Mark nodded. "Exactly. Go to college, travel the world, fall in love with someone who's on the same path as you. Don't settle for someone who's already planted his roots." He gave her a small, encouraging smile. A tiny smile flickered across Sarah's face. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was rushing things. Maybe she did have a whole world to explore. The disappointment didn't disappear completely, but it lessened, replaced by a glimmer of hope. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I get it." She still felt sad, but a little bit of the confusion had lifted. He wasn't rejecting her. He was rejecting the situation. And maybe, just maybe, that made a difference. She started to understand. "Come on," Mark said gently, standing up and offering her his hand. "Let's get you back inside before you catch a cold." He noticed the robe was still slightly open and subtly adjusted it, pulling it closed a bit more. Sarah took his hand, her fingers brushing against his. A small shiver ran through her, but this time it wasn't from the cold. It was something else. A lingering spark of what she had hoped for, mixed with the acceptance of what wasn't meant to be. He walked her to her front door, the silence between them no longer heavy and awkward, but filled with a quiet understanding. At the doorstep, she turned to him, her eyes searching his. "Thank you," she said softly. "For being honest with me." Mark smiled. "You're welcome, Sarah. And happy birthday. I hope you have a great year." He watched as she went inside, closing the door gently behind her. He stood there for a moment, making sure she was safely inside, before turning back towards his own house. He felt a sense of relief, but also a lingering sadness. He'd done the right thing, but it hadn't been easy. Back in his own house, Mark leaned against the door, closing his eyes. He felt drained, like he'd just run a marathon. He replayed the conversation in his head, wondering if he could have handled it better. Had he been too harsh? Too soft? Had he said the right things? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There was no use dwelling on it. He'd made his decision, and he'd stood by it. He'd done what he thought was right. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. He thought about Sarah, her bright eyes filled with hope, then clouded with disappointment. He hoped she'd be okay. He hoped she'd understand, eventually. He hoped he hadn't ruined their friendship. He glanced at the clock. It was late. He still had to take out the trash. He picked up the fallen bag, the coffee grounds and junk mail feeling heavier than before. He dragged the bin to the curb, the rattling wheels a somber soundtrack to his thoughts. He looked up at Mrs. Henderson's house, but the windows were dark. He wondered if she'd seen anything. He had a feeling she had. And that was just the beginning of his problems. The next morning, Mark woke up with a knot in his stomach. He knew he had to face Sarah eventually, but he wasn't looking forward to it. What would she say? How would she act? Would she even talk to him? He decided to get it over with. He walked over to her house, his heart pounding in his chest. He rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Sarah answered the door. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked normal. There was a moment of awkward silence. Neither of them knew what to say. Mark broke the silence. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "How are you doing?" Sarah shrugged. "Okay," she said, her voice flat. "I'm going out for breakfast with some friends." Mark nodded. "That's good," he said. "Have fun." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Listen, Sarah, about last night." Sarah cut him off. "It's okay, Mark. I understand." She looked him in the eye, and he saw a hint of a smile. "I was being silly. Thanks for setting me straight." The relief that washed over him was immense. She wasn't angry. She wasn't resentful. She understood. He smiled back at her. "Anytime, Sarah. Anytime." The awkwardness began to dissipate. Later that day, Mark saw Sarah again, this time at the mailbox. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to act. He didn't want to make things awkward again. Sarah smiled at him, a genuine, friendly smile. "Hey, Mark," she said. "How's it going?" "Good," he said, relieved. "Just checking the mail." He paused. "So, are we still friends?" Sarah laughed. "Of course, we're still friends, Mark. Why wouldn't we be?" She shrugged. "Last night was a little crazy. But it doesn't change anything. You're still the best neighbor a girl could ask for." Mark grinned. "That's good to hear," he said. "So, about that math homework." He winked. Sarah rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "Don't even start," she said. "I'm done with math forever." They chatted for a few more minutes, about school, about the weather, about Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning roses. It was just like old times, except different. There was a new understanding between them, a new level of respect. They had faced a difficult situation and come out on the other side, their friendship intact. They established boundaries. But the peace didn't last long. A few days later, Mark was at the grocery store when he overheard Mrs. Henderson talking to another neighbor, Mrs. Davis. He tried to avoid them, but it was too late. And there he was, kneeling in front of her, in the middle of the night. Mrs. Henderson was saying, her voice hushed but carrying. She was wearing that little robe, you know the one, and it was practically falling off her shoulders. It was scandalous, I tell you. Mrs. Davis gasped. Mark? I never would have thought. Mark felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment. He wanted to disappear, to crawl under a rock and hide. He knew he had to say something, to defend himself, but he didn't know where to start. How could he explain the truth without making Sarah look bad? He took a deep breath and walked over to them. Mrs. Henderson, he said, his voice tight. I couldn't help but overhear. You're misinterpreting the situation. Nothing inappropriate happened between me and Sarah. He tried to sound calm and reasonable, but he could feel his hands shaking. The gossip had begun, and it was spreading fast. Oh, Mark, Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm sure you think nothing inappropriate happened. But it didn't look very good, did it? A young girl, alone at night, wearing a robe. She had just turned 18, Mark interjected, trying to keep his voice level. And we were just talking. I was making sure she was okay. Talking? Mrs. Davis scoffed. At that hour? In a robe? Mark knew he was fighting a losing battle. The gossip had taken root, and there was no way to stop it now. He decided to take a different approach. Look, he said, addressing both women. If you're so concerned, why don't you talk to Sarah's parents? They know what happened. They trust me. And they'll tell you that you're wrong. He turned and walked away, leaving them speechless. He knew it was a gamble, but it was the only way he could think of to clear his name. He felt terrible. He would have to talk to Sarah's parents. He knew they would listen to him. He hoped they would believe him. His reputation was on the line. That evening, Mark went to see Sarah's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. He explained everything, from Sarah's unexpected appearance in the robe to his gentle rejection and the sapling analogy. He didn't sugarcoat anything, but he also emphasized his respect for Sarah and his commitment to doing what was right. Mr. Johnson listened intently, his brow furrowed. Mrs. Johnson, however, looked relieved. We were wondering what was going on, she said. Sarah told us she had a little crush on you, and we were a little worried. Mr. Johnson nodded. We trust you, Mark. We know you would never do anything to hurt Sarah. He paused. We're glad you handled it the way you did. It takes a lot of maturity to do the right thing, especially when it's difficult. Mark felt a weight lift off his shoulders. They believed him. They understood. He wasn't going to be branded as some kind of predator. He was going to be okay. The Johnsons were grateful to him. Mrs. Johnson added, We'll talk to Mrs. Henderson. We'll set the record straight. Mark smiled, a genuine smile this time. Thank you, he said. I really appreciate it. He left their house feeling like he could finally breathe again. He was in the clear. The next day, Mrs. Henderson approached Mark while he was working in his yard. He braced himself for another confrontation, but to his surprise, she was apologetic. Mark, she said, her voice subdued. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson spoke to me. I had no idea what really happened. I'm so sorry for jumping to conclusions and spreading gossip. Mark accepted her apology, relieved that the misunderstanding had been cleared up. He knew that gossip could be damaging, and he was grateful that the Johnsons had intervened. Life slowly returned to normal. Sarah went off to college, and Mark continued his plumbing business. He saw her during school breaks, and they always greeted each other with a friendly smile. Their bond as neighbors remained strong, built on a foundation of respect and understanding. He occasionally thought about that night, the night Sarah turned 18 and changed everything. He was thankful he had made the right decision, even though it had been difficult. He had protected Sarah, preserved his reputation, and strengthened his relationship with the Johnsons. It had been a close call, but he had navigated it successfully. He learned an important lesson. Years later, Mark was still living in the same house, still fixing leaky faucets and unclogging drains. He was a little older, a little wiser, but still the same friendly neighborhood plumber. He even got a Christmas card from Sarah every year, updating him on her life and her adventures. He was proud of her. She had gone on to do great things, traveling the world, pursuing her dreams, and becoming a strong, independent woman. He knew, in his heart, that he had played a small part in her success. He had shown her the importance of making responsible choices, even when they were difficult. And sometimes, when he was taking out the trash late at night, he would look up at the streetlight and remember that night, the night Sarah turned 18. He would smile, knowing that he had done the right thing. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Doing the right thing matters. It was better to do the right thing even if it was hard. The end.